We're with Eastern Connecticut head men's basketball coach Bill Geitner. Eastern just days away from opening up the 2012-13 season. Bill, you guys have been practicing for about a month now. How'd the preseason go?
I think it's going well. Clearly we're still trying to create an identity, both offensively and defensively. But, the things I'm happy with is the effort and the mental concentration at practice. With so many new guys, just incorporating things, how we play offensively and defensively, it's going to take some time. But, guys are willing to listen and are competing and working hard.
If you think back to last year's preseason, is it very different in terms of you had 4 or 5 real experienced players that knew what it was all about?
It is different. I mean, obviously the 4 seniors from last year, coming into preseason knew everything, from how we did things offensively, defensively, how we incorporated teaching points in each and every drill. So this year it's a much slower process, but ultimately we'll get there.
You lost so much from last year, but just reflect a little bit on the excitement of last year, especially in postseason play.
I think it was a great experience for everyone that was involved. A chance to host the Little East Conference, tournament, play in front of a packed house, and on top of that, the games were terrific games. Any one of the 4 teams that was in the tournament there in the semis could have won it. We were very, very fortunate to beat an unbelievable Keene State team in the semis, and then in the finals to beat the team that has kind of been the standard bearer in the conference the last 6 years, and to do it on our home court in front of our fans, was an unbelievable experience for our guys. And I think that just carried over when we went up to Oswego State and played 2 good teams in another very exciting atmosphere.
Was that Oswego win one of the biggest in your coaching career?
I think it was. Just the magnitude of the game, how we played, having a 10-point lead and then watching them come back and the crowd getting back into the game, and then us staying together, through some adversity, and then ultimately, Brian hitting a huge shot at the end. What a way to kind of continue the journey.
You talked about the team in that game staying together, and that's something that you can't really teach a young team, right? In other words, they've got to be in the fire.
Without a doubt. I think one of the greatest strengths that last year's team had is just the chemistry, the togetherness, the unselfishness, on both ends of the court, defensively and offensively. I mean, defensively they were there for each other on every pass, every cut, every screen. And then offensively, I think if you watched us, we were very, very unselfish, and they were willing to give up an open shot to give a teammate a better, higher percentage shot. And those are things each and every year, that whole chemistry, that togetherness, that trust amongst teammates, that's something that starts when they step on campus in September, and is continuing to build.
Well, you talk about that progression, and last year for those 4 seniors, it was like the epitome of their 4-year careers. It wouldn't be too much to say that maybe all 4 of them had career years, but are you sort of indicating that you're sort of, at least in the early going this year, you're sort of taking a step back and maybe in a sense starting over, or no? I mean,
I'm not going to ever use the word starting over. I mean, I think we want to continue to build, and we do have some, experienced guys that, are in different roles this year. But I think clearly, what I've seen, that they're excited to be in those roles and they're ready. The things I think that have slowed our progression down a little bit is the fact that 4 of the 5 recruited student athletes that we have on our roster are nursing injuries, and so I think that has hurt or slowed the progression. Not able to get those freshmen, the new guys in, especially during these first 3 or 4 weeks when we are building the foundation. That's slowed, I think, our team's progress.
It would have probably been easier if these injuries to new players occurred last year.
Most definitely.
Right?
Right. Because we had new guys, but I mean they weren't rotation guys necessarily. Where clearly this year, several of the freshmen are anticipating, being rotation guys.
Well, this year, Bill, it looks like you might have 3 starters maybe in stone with Chris Robitaille, Mike Garrow, and maybe Joe Ives. Is that sort of accurate? And the rest of the people, are those other 2 positions open?
I think so. I mean, clearly, the 3 guys that you mentioned have all, had great careers. Chris Robitaille, I think had a great year last year. I mean, he was one of the best, low post players in our conference, and from a field goal percentage stat, he was one of the best in the country. So I think we're, hoping that he continues to do that, and we're going to ask more of him. Joey Ives has basically been a starting point guard since he stepped on campus, and those experiences and battles that he's gone through in conference play and in the NCAA tournament, I think he'll rely on those heavily, and I think he knows what to expect, being a leader of a program. And then Mike, Garrow last year was a starter, then came down with an injury, which kept him out the rest of the season. So I think he's really excited to get back and playing, and he's a very, very talented player on the offensive end. And what I've been impressed with is Michael's effort on the defensive end. I think he's understands that that's an area that he needs to continue to work on, but he's really embraced that, because I think he had an opportunity to sit and watch last year's team, and he knows why we were good, why we were successful last year, and that was on the defensive end. So he's picked up that torch and run with it.
Coach Holowati always talks about, when he's talking, our baseball coach, when he's talking in the preseason about players that will need to step up, he'll say, well, now they have to be primetime players. Who do you have that might have been a fringe player or learning the last couple of years, but is really going to have to assume a bigger role?
I think probably 4 guys come to mind. Brian Salzillo last year was, clearly had a good year and hit huge shots. I mean, some would argue he hit the shot of the season against Oswego State to win the game. But he's been a role player, kind of a specialist. I mean, he has to now go outside that, his comfort zone and, be an every possession guy. Brandon Yarborough as a freshman last year had some big games and big moments for us, and he's going to continue to have to add to those moments and once again bring it each and every possession of every game. Tyler Hunley's a senior this year, had big games for us. UMass Boston here hit 5 or 6 threes and really opened that game up for us. But once again, it's consistency. Those 3 guys, can they bring some of those moments to every game and just be more consistent? Justin Nunez, who kind of was a backup point guard, but because of Che Phillips, last year's backup point guard, played so well, Justin's minutes got put on the back burner. Well, I think this year he has an opportunity to be on the court in game situations, and I think he's ready for that. So I guess those 4 guys come to mind the most, where they all had moments, but now we're asking for consistent moments each and every day.
Well, you talked a little bit about the new group, the group of freshmen. Even though they're battling injuries now, could that be a very, very athletic group?
I think so. I mean, we're excited about all our freshmen. Obviously some have been, injured, and a couple of them may be out for the season or a semester. But I think when they come back and they're healthy, it's a very talented group, and how they incorporate into our style of play, both offensively and defensively, is something that we have to see, because they just haven't been out there. But we're excited that they're all here and they're all part of our program.
Bill, last question. You guys, in the preseason poll last year, the Little East Conference, you were sort of under the radar. You were right in the middle of the poll. Even though you're only 3rd, you're ranked 3rd this year in the preseason, do you feel like you still sort of have a target on your back based on what you guys did last year?
I mean, I guess so. I think going into the year, I mean, any conference game, you're going to be identified as the reigning champ, so to speak. So I guess you're going to get that. But I think the conference is at the point now where every game is big, whoever you are. You can't go into a game and bring 75% effort or focus in our conference, because you're just not going to be successful. So I think this year it's going to be very, very competitive. You know, I just glanced at the poll. I don't get too excited one way or the other with any poll. It's more what you do on the court. So I guess to sum it up, our guys are excited for the year. You know, our goals haven't changed. You know, we talked last year, you know, the most successful season that we've had here in some time. You know, our goals were to come to practice and get better individually and collectively every day. And if you do that by the end of February, you're going to be a pretty good team.
So the Warriors open up their season on Friday, November 16th. They're going to be taking on Western New England University at 5:30 in the opener of the Eastern Tip-Off Tournament. Bill, thanks. Good luck.
Thank you.